We've seen repeats of what's going on now throughout other star systems. Lyra, the Elohim that first came into manifestation there over millions of years, a thriving civilization, humanoid in nature, gigantic. Some of these beings were 17 to 30 foot tall. Eventually were infiltrated by the lower light. And this is where some decided to become comrades with the lower light. Others wanted to stay in truth and service to others. And that is where a war broke out and their major star was exploded in that time. Offshooting from that goes to the Orion Wars. Now with the Orion Wars, there's a lot of information out there about different groups of Orions that are negative. I've been aware of beings there that are predominantly reptilian, archonic lower light energies that are in that sector but not from that sector. And what they were doing there was, and are at times, because this is a temporal thing. Again, we have to get out of linear thinking and look at things unboundedly 360-degree awareness. What the lower light have wanted to do in Orion was overtake the Horsehead Nebula, as well as the stargates and portals there, which the nebula is of itself as well, so they can travel through that and distribute the AI to other places as well. They didn't want to go to war. But it got to a point that with the councils, it had to be understood that these beings are not going to take no for an answer. And by that time, many had perished in the wars there. It eventually got to a stalemate where neither side had won, but there was a lot of damage on both sides. And then let's take us up to more recent times of how there's a continuation of really what's going on now has been going on for a long time. We had Tiamat, Malona here, which is now the asteroid belt. There was conflict here. But what we tend to find is that eventually all paths lead back to source. And an example of this is with the Pleiadians. The Pleiadians are a conglomerate of many different types of intelligences throughout this neck of the woods in the galaxy. And predominantly, if we look at them from this frequency but offshoot into the future, they've been time traveling back. If you look at the Pleiades now, it's too young to harbour life. And they'd come here and assisted many times. But then at times they got to be seen as gods, and really they're our offspring, an example of what we become. But they've come back to try and assist us to show us what we're capable of as well. Around the time of Malona, or Tiamat as other people call it, there was beings from Mars, which was the satellite of that planetary body, as well as other areas that came here, and there was already beings here. The Lyrians had actually been coming here and having this place as an outpost for 20 million plus years, but also the Elohim had been here beforehand and gone through different stages of evolution, as well as other beings from star systems. Really, this is being used as an outpost and a resting place at times. And it was being protected too because of the capability that this planet, this beautiful planet, has. At that time, humanoid beings from Mars came here. The Lyrians and others, we could say councils, said, all right, this is just going to have to be it for them. And in sync with that, maybe 100,000 years later, the reptilians were given custodianship here as well. Now, some say that the reptilians are originally from here. I could say that they've been here on and off for millions of years as well. This is where it gets quite laid. But there's also reptilians from the Draco constellation as well as many other places. What's their higher self? An Elohim being too. We're all, our light that we shine, that aspect is an Elohim created being. Well, there's what we could say universal law in situations like this, meaning the reptilians getting custodianship of Earth at that time. And they broke that by introducing the R part of the brain to the human. It wasn't originally there. And the information I've got is that it was introduced 300 plus thousand years ago by the reptilians as a biological implant. Now, when we see the brain light up through various devices, when we're getting triggered, what part of the brain lights up is the R part of the brain. Lust, greed, negativity, being triggered, that's where you light up. Now, some say it's responsible for fight or flight. Well, my response to that is, we had to have had fight or flight way before that time, because we're still here and we survived. I think it may amplify the fight or flight, but that's it. And so the R part of the brain is a multi-dimensional device that when you're being triggered, it gets that energy and distributes it. Now, there's different ways and places it can be distributed to. It can be distributed to the artificial intelligence that's holding a frequency because it thrives and lives off that energy. Demonic, archonic, lower energies also want to derive that and take that energy. Some might call it loosh. So from that, the Pleiadians were actually given custodianship for a short amount of time, which turned into Atlantis and Lemuria, which are Pleiadian colonies. And Atlantis and Lemuria got along for quite a long time, a few 100,000 years, a couple of 100,000 years at least. It wasn't until we could say more recent times that the Atlanteans lost balance with spirituality and technology, and they actually had multiple falls. Some of that was from, we could say, a war with the Lemurians. You've got to remember too, that Atlantis and Lemuria weren't just two places on this planet. They were spread out through multiple places. Each race were occupying different spots. But an interesting story how the start of Atlantis and Lemuria happened was that the Pleiadians got the Denisovian and created the Australian Aboriginal to incarnate into that body to have the human experience and start it off. And this is written on the Pleiadian glyphs and goes back to the original people's story here in Australia of the creation game this time round. So, through multiple falls of Atlantis, this is the situation we're in now. The point of all this is that all this really doesn't matter. It's information. But what's going to transform this world is the heart.